processes within the organization. So when you have a quality management system that looks at marketing, it looks at accounting and finance, it looks at customer care, it looks at data protection, it looks at partnership and stakeholder relationships, it looks at things around complaint procedures, and more importantly, it looks at recruitment, selection, and placement of staff and volunteers. This is a particular management system that many NGOs don't have, and at the moment we are trying to help a few NGOs in the UK, in Africa, and other parts of the world to have this particular system in place. Because if you don't have a quality management system in place, you cannot monitor or you cannot assess where the gaps are in terms of your organization. So that is important for fundraising. It is good for also reporting openly, and it is good for partnership between and among NGOs. And then, of course, you have your evaluation criteria, which is the second to last or the penultimate global standard on your left-hand side of the screen. And this is where you analyze and you evaluate programs that you implement from time to time. You look at whether these programs relate to tender specification, whether they meet grant conditions or criteria, whether they are effective enough, in other words, they can stand up to scrutiny, whether they are proficient, in other words, they're impacting, and more importantly, if they can be subject to long-term scrutiny, in other words, they're sustainable. So these are two important standards, despite the others. I think these are the two important standards you need to look at: quality management and, of course, the evaluation criteria, which measures the way NGOs operate from time to time. Again, there are other standards, as I mentioned, but these are very critical and important to the way in which NGOs function at the moment. We cannot emphasize quite often how trust is important, building trust. Again, in our relationships with our parents, our grandparents, our partners, our spouses, members of the family, relatives, friends, confidants, business and professional people. Trust is very, very important. Trust is not just about saying, I will do X or I will do Y. Trust is about, if you say something, if you make a promise, you keep it. If you make a pledge, you honor it. That is what trust is all about. It's not just a word. It's about a deed, an action. And so if you want to build trust, you have to be open. You have to be sincere. And you have to always ensure that whatever you say, you will do. So in building trust, you have to make sure that your standards are clear. You have to make sure that you have a proper reporting system in place. I mentioned there are several different standards, and you can see them on the platform here. There are standards that look at safeguarding. There are those that do a lot about evaluation. So, for example, when you're publishing monitoring evaluation reports, you have to make sure that those reports speak the truth of participants, feedback from other audiences, stakeholders. You have to take them into consideration, and you can use a variety of ways to get your feedback. You can use e-questionnaires, you can use evaluation forms, as in the case of this particular way in which we present. You could also use inquiry forms, you can use attendance registers, you can use video diaries, you can use statements from people. So for example, someone may say, I like this training program, I'd like to come again. Or I think this training program can be improved by adding X, Y, Z. All of those are very important aspects of feedback and reporting. And of course, once you continue to demonstrate honesty and credibility, you can improve your program. So whatever you say, for example, if someone says, I like this project, but I think you need to improve it here and there, you need to add it there, you need to tweak a bit, that is what you can do. And so in terms of this presentation today, this overall presentation resulted from your feedback from your evaluation forms that you've been given over the last 2, 3 years or more. It resulted from your feedback, and it also resulted from the comments that you gave to us through the funds for NGOs. So it is important to have feedback because you could improve, you can build on what you have, and people will take you seriously. And more importantly, make sure that whatever standards you have are consistent with the local authority, the local municipality, the local town council, the neighborhood, the area or district in which you live. Make sure that they are consistent, they are aligned with, and also they are aligned with the regional government or the national government, or even international organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the Commonwealth. So quality is something that is dynamic, it is buoyant, it keeps on moving. And so like change itself, which is constant, quality assurance is also constant. 2 slides ago, we spoke again about donor confidence. In fact, at the beginning, the moderator, she also mentioned within the learning outcomes or the objectives of this presentation, it's about confidence, etc. So confidence derives from trust. It derives from confidence. It derives from the ability to know and not to know. Because even if you don't know something, you should still be confident in saying, look, I don't know, or I don't believe you because of X, Y, and Z. So confidence is a basis of trust that you have in yourself and others. So why do donors look for confidence in NGOs? Well, they feel that if an NGO has been set up officially or formally, it should have certain systems in place. And the reason why, because again, it enhances credibility and it has the potential for creating linkages and partnerships, credibility with ties with other funders, etc. It also helps with funding because if an organization is properly formalized, if it has a proper structure, a proper management system of reporting, a proper monitoring and evaluation approach, a proper feedback, marketing systems, etc., it is likely to attract resources. If, however, it is not properly structured, it can affect the way in which the organization's resources are obtained. And it could also affect the impact of the organization, the way it functions. So confidence is very, very important because as a result of that, you can attract the kind of resources that you need. And so this slide here, as brief as it is telling us how important donors, when they express their confidence, it then lends itself to funding and other resources. Quality assurance is also important when it comes to program delivery. And the word better program delivery simply means that if you have standards in place, all the events and the activities that you implement or you carry out on a daily, weekly basis, or a fortnightly basis, you can be able to measure them. And in other words, you'll be able to understand whether or not you are underperforming, whether or not you're meeting your targets, you're exceeding your targets, or you need to do something else that is different. And so in setting out any program of activity, your goals need to be very pellucid or lucid. In other words, it needs to be clearly defined. Of course, your objectives have to be measurable, both quantifiably and qualitatively. So your outcomes would be what you expect from your beneficiaries or participants. Your outputs would be the quantifiable, if you like, measurements. How many people would be involved? The percentile or percentages of people to be involved. How would you derive that outcome or output? You know, what conditions would you use? What measurements would you use? And of course, planning is very important. So you have a brilliant idea. I want to employ 25 volunteers over the next year within my organization. How do you go about doing that? Well, first of all, you have to do your internal analysis to find out where these volunteers will fit in. Will they help you with administration? Will they help you with supervision? Will they help you with field work? Will they help you with communications? Will they help you with marketing, technology, outsourcing? Will they help you with publicizing? Will they help you with social media? So you have to plan accordingly before you can design a program of activity. And once you do that, you then structure that program where you have your aims, your objectives, your methods of delivery. What type of monitoring device would you use? Who would be responsible for each of those systems and procedures? So again, everything has to be done in a very structured manner. And then, of course, when you're reporting, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to explain what standards you're using. Are you using the internal management standard that we were talking about earlier, quality management, or are you using the evaluation criteria? Or are you using the humanitarian criteria for measuring standards? The humanitarian criteria is when you're looking at people in totality, every aspect of their lives, social, cultural, financial, ethnic, economic, etc. And then, of course, you have to have a very good relationship with your partners, your stakeholders, your local authorities, your municipalities, your councillors, your MLAs. In the case of the European Union, your MEPs. You have to be able to make sure that you have very good relationships with people and ensure that whenever you're having a discussion about a particular concept that they're involved as well, you consult with them over a period of time. I always emphasize to my volunteers and my members of staff and as a consultant speaking to clients from time to time about employee development, staff development. The technology we have cannot train staff. It is human beings who have to train staff. The technology is there to facilitate access of information and data, but it cannot train people. What we're doing here today, for example, we're using technology to facilitate the process, but you need a human being to be there to conduct the training. So staff building is very important. Building capacity. Capacity means strengthening you, resilience, being robust, being solidified, being able to persevere or to persist. All of these are very, very important. So building your staff is crucial. Even if you just have 3 members of staff, you might have an administrator and 2 volunteers. Always build them up, always train them in systems, in procedures, you know, in the way of doing things properly. And always be a learning NGO. In management, we talk about a learning firm or a learning enterprise. In other words, that organization is constantly developing. the managers, the trustees are constantly reading. They're trying to understand how to improve their personal development. And once you improve yourself personally, you can also improve others as well. And so the cycle of program delivery evolves around quality control and how that process is managed. Without that understanding and appreciation of that process, you cannot manage it. And so knowledge in this instance is crucial and critical. And that is what this slide is suggesting to us. The monitoring and feedback is really the soul, the spirit, the centrality, the epicenter, if you like, of quality assurance. And we'll take some time to go through this because this, in essence, is the heartbeat of what an organization should be doing when it comes to quality control. Once you establish a program, whether it is a football tournament, whether it is netball, whether it is cricket, whether it's hockey, whether it's boxing or karate, or jeet kune do or kung fu or boxing, any sport, badminton, any sport for that matter, whether it's a contact sport, you have to make sure that you have a system of monitoring. In other words, persons who are performing, you have to monitor their progress. So you develop a personal development plan, for example, if you're training them, and that plan has objectives, it has outcomes, outputs, it has the feedback mechanism within it to tell us who will be doing what, who will be responsible for the beneficiary or the participant, and then the different tasks that will be allocated to those individuals, whether the tasks are done by the beneficiary, it is done by the peer mentor, it's then done by the coordinator, the instructor, the trainer, whoever that person is. Those tasks are explained in the clearest possible way. And if you look on the right side of the screen, it suggests, for example, if you have a program monitoring system, you can use a log frame matrix. In other words, you can use a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart tells you the different dates and time activities would be done, or it's like a flow chart. And then you have your aims and objectives chart or tables that suggests what you'll be doing from time to time, the number of beneficiaries that would be involved, and the percentage of those beneficiaries. So if you have 200 young men and women involved in a particular sporting activity, you would look to see if 50 or 60% of them at the end of that program will succeed in terms of not just their technical performance, but their performance as human beings, how they interact with each other, socially, culturally, how they gel with each other. Do they become friends at the end of the day? Or do they become people who are drifting, who are isolated? So you have a variety of tools that you can use to determine people's attitudes and behaviors. Where field assessments are concerned, when people are out, for example, let's say you might have a group of elderly people in a park, or they're in a luncheon club or a day club or a day center or a hospice. You use that facility to understand who they are. You have a conversation with them. I visit a number of elderly homes from time to time as part of my job, but it's also part of my occupation because I need to know how elders are thinking, what they think about young people, because I have children, grandchildren, and great-grands. So I want to know exactly, as a consultant, but as a person, how people are thinking. And so you go out there and you do your own assessments. Some people have checklists. they have a list of things to do and they tick off on a daily basis. That is also useful. Some people use their phones to do it. That is also useful. But the thing I'm trying to explain here is that you must have a result, you must have an impact. What is it you're trying to achieve or accomplish? So whatever tool you use will determine the results that you get. Feedback. Feedback, we cannot underestimate feedback. If, for example, you don't tell us what you think about this project or this program or this training session, we wouldn't know. We are not magic people. We are not gods or demigods. We cannot determine whether or not the project or the program is good or not. You have to tell us. So feedback is essential. So when you get feedback, you gain satisfaction. You begin to understand the concerns of people, the interests of people. Some people use Google Forms. Some people use suggestion boxes, these little boxes, and you have a slit at the top and you put your suggestion. So for example, you might say, I suggest that this program be changed from midday to in the afternoon. I suggest that this project be extended for more than an hour or something like that. And then of course you have report cards. These are little cards where you write what you think about a trainer, what you think about an organization, what you think about a program or a session. And that is used also as a feedback mechanism. And then those who are very much engaged in technological innovation tend to use digital tools. These are tools that are electronicized. The technology is there. They have different algorithms. They have different mathematical formulas or geometric formulas. Those who did trigonometry would know what I'm referring to, whether it is traditional maths or modern maths. But it's about numbers, analytics, statistics, data, or datum. And so these tools can only be used efficiently and effectively if we as human beings know what we are talking about. So for example, if there are 200 people on this platform and I don't know who they are, I can put in the number 200 and then I can ask the digital tool or platform to tell me what is the percentage or what are the percentages of people who are paying attention to the program. And it will give me an estimate, not a guess estimate, an estimate because of the way I questioned that machine. So we can use machine learning also as a digital tool to measure the impact of outcomes and outputs. And so you have many things like Kubo Toolbox, Power BI, all of these are very complicated tools, but you could also use very simple tools of AI to actually assess the performance of people as well as your organization. But again, the centrality of all of this is knowledge. Without the knowledge, in terms of information and data, you cannot do any of the quality control measures I'm referring to. So knowledge is at the very heart and center of this process. And this is something that we do as consultants on a daily basis or a weekly basis. We report, we review, and then we report. Some people report and then they review. In reporting or reviewing, you have to make sure you have all the facts and the figures. So if you're reviewing, for example, one of your projects, let's say in healthcare or climate justice or environmental sustainability or data protection, or you're doing something around employability for young people into jobs, for example, you have to make sure that you have all the information on those young people What are their suggestions for improving their skill sets? How do you scale up, or how do you improve and enhance the project? And once you have all of that information and data, then you review the program or the project. And once you review it, you then report your findings, the suggestions, the recommendations, a way forward, and of course, what type of funding you're looking for. So quality control is an amalgam. It's a bringing together, a fusing, a pulling together of several strands of information and data sets based on feedback, based on objectives, based on goals, and more importantly, based on what people are interested in at a particular time. So monitoring and feedback is something that should be consistent in your NGO performance. You cannot overemphasize the importance of training for staff. It has to be done at all levels. And if we look on the screen here, I was able to access this kind of information from the International Labour Organization, which is part of the United Nations body responsible for labor legislation and laws. And so across Africa, there are people who are trained in governance, leadership, in other words, organizational development. In Europe, people are trained in how to present, how to build capacity, how to report. In Europe, they are taught how to be accountable and how to develop organizational systems. In Latin America and the Caribbean, they're taught how to respond to emergencies. We've noticed, for example, in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and other parts of Southeast Asia, flood relief issues, climate change. It's affecting many parts of the world. Even in the United States, we have snow. In the United Kingdom, we have wintry showers at the moment. So all of these things are built in when we look at quality assurance. In North America, again, it's about capacity building, measuring impact, etc. And in South Asia, including India, again, it's about accountability and internal processes that you have for building capacity to deal with internal as well as external issues. And finally, how do we overcome barriers? That's one of the outcomes of this session today. And there are lots of barriers. I will just go through them because we are running out of time. You have barriers in obviously money or paisa or chitna, financial resources. Sometimes you don't have adequate staff or you have low-skilled staff. Most people are overworked these days. There's something called technology fatigue. That is something you have to be mindful of. Sometimes projects are not very clearly defined, and that can create a problem. And then people are not collecting data properly. They're very sloven. They're very lazy. They're slow in collecting data because they don't have the kind of systems in place to collect that data. And then, of course, you have so many requirements that donors require. Every application form is different to another. An application form for sports would be different to one for health. One for climate justice will be different to the one for economic development and policy, etc. And then you have issues with lack of commitment. People are not dedicated. They want money. We say that when people get money, they become funny in some instances. So they lack commitment to the job. And when you are an NGO, you are a servant leader. That's your job, to serve. Our Sikh brothers and sisters call it seva. Islamic traditions call it zakah, and the Christians call it charity. But these are very, very important aspects of quality control that are part and parcel of our culture. And so I hope today that you have enjoyed this presentation. It is one that I think you should always respect and honor in terms of the content, because you can use this content to improve and enhance your NGO status. And so today we focused on defining quality assurance. Within that, we look at donor confidence and renewal. We looked at how staffing concerns can be measured. And then finally, we looked at how we can overcome barriers. I wish to thank you very much for listening. And at this time, I wish to avail myself for any questions that you may wish to ask. Thank you very much, participants.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for your presentation.
You're most welcome.
Participants, now you can send in your questions so that we can take up in the Q&A session. So let's begin with the first question we have. Um, what is one quick step NGOs can take today to begin improving their quality standards?
That sounds like immediate gratification, so to speak. There is no real quick step. The word quick is, is conditional. It's an adjective, a verb. There's no quick step. In other words, there's no shortcut to quality control. I said from the beginning, it's a process that evolves. It takes time. It's like birth and death and sickness. If we look at our lives as human beings, we would understand that quality is an evolutionary process. It starts, it continues, it ends, and then it goes back again. So every project that we have would demand a particular kind of quality control. And the only way we can understand that is to understand the project that we have. And that is why I use the word knowledge. To know is important. So if we're doing, for example, a project on environmental resilience, in other words, teaching young people to be environmentally friendly, not to cut down the trees in the forest and use it as firewood or charcoal, for example. That is a quality control mechanism you need to put in place. How would you go about doing that? Well, the first thing you need to understand what is happening to the forest before you deforest it. So quality control is based on knowledge. It's not something that you can just pluck from the air. You have to understand the situation, the context. And that is what I would say to the participant. Understand the context. What is it you're trying to do? What is the end result? What is your goal? And once you know that, once you can answer that question, then you can look at the type of quality control measure or measurements that you need to employ or deploy to make sure that your project works effectively. So there's no shortcut to it. It's a process. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question is QA only for large NGOs, or can small community-based organizations also adopt it effectively?
Yes, quality assurance, I'm afraid it's a leveler. We say cricket is the greatest leveler, sports is the greatest leveler because it brings out the bad, the good, and the ugly, so to speak. Quality control is the same. It is applicable to any organization, micro, small, medium, large, conglomerate, any organization. In fact, the smaller the organization, the more it is incumbent on organizations, particularly when they have just started, fledgling organizations, evolutionary NGOs. It is important that they have quality control systems in place. So it has nothing to do with size or composition. It has to do with an imperative, a necessity. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, what low-cost tools or methods would you recommend for improving quality performance?
I don't know what the questioner means by low cost. Again, using another adjective, low cost, high cost, medium cost. Quality control is not a costly exercise. Again, this is the impression that is given to us by mass media and by people who don't understand what quality control is. Um, as a citizen of the world, I've been involved in quality control since I was 18. I was taught this by my dad, our late dad. And really, it's about looking at what is suitable for you. So, for example, if you have a new NGO that is, I don't know, 6 months old or a year old or even 2 years old, because it's still young. 2 years is still a relatively young NGO. Um, what systems would you put in place for quality control? So, for example, people who volunteer for your organization, you need to have a volunteer training program. That training program should tell you, for example, how you are going to bring volunteers into the organization. And once they come in, what type of training do they need? Well, they need training in customer care, they need training in finance, they need training in marketing, IT, they need training also in evaluation procedures. They also need training in stakeholder partnerships, confidence building. All of those are part and parcel of quality control. Those are basics. Those are fundamentals. They're not complex areas. And then, of course, you need to assess the volunteer's particular expertise. You have a volunteer, for example, who is trained in law. He or she may have a degree in law, or that person might be a legal executive. How do you use that person within the organization? In fact, not use, how you maximize that person's expertise. So these are things that we need to understand first before we ask ourselves what type of quality control. In order to understand the what, we need to understand the why. Why this person is here, why are we doing this? And once we understand why we're doing it, we'll understand what is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question is QA something that needs a dedicated team or can existing staff handle it?
I would say that, you know, if I use our charity, for example, the person who deals with quality control would be myself because I'm the director and the chair. But I actually developed these systems when the organization had none, if not little. So yes, it's important to have a person who is in charge of that, but I think it has to be a shared responsibility between the directors. In our case, we have about 3 or 4 different directors, one for IT, the other is responsible for education. We have one that does marketing, and then we have our program manager responsible for managing projects. So each of these individuals has a quality control responsibility, so to speak, but the overall responsibility lies with me as the chair. But I don't impose my will because I have a shared understanding of what is required. So again, it depends on the person. Not every person has that experience and knowledge of quality control. So at the beginning, you will need to have a shared responsibility, or alternatively, you need to find someone outside of the organization who is not just a quality control expert, particularly someone who's qualified in management and business administration, but someone who has the cultural sensitivity to deal with your organization too. Because if you have people from different faiths and different languages, like our faith, or like our organization in particular, you need to be very, very sensitive in how you approach it. So quality control, as I said, is not just a byword or byproduct. It involves people, resources, systems, and more importantly, knowledge.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The
Welcome.
next question is What type of training or capacity building are most useful for staff when starting QA?
Training around quality, what is quality control, the training that we did today. So you start from the very minutiae, the basic, what we call, you start from the dirty, from Mother Earth. What is quality? First of all, what is quality? People see quality in different senses. Some people say, my quality of life is poor, my quality of life is rich, my quality of life is medium. Quality simply means something that is good, something that is pure, something that is standardized, something that is respected and valued and appreciated. So quality can be measured, but it is also measured in terms of effect and the value it has. So I think start with that definition first. And then once you can define quality in the context of your own organization, then you could look for assurance, because assurance simply means how are you going to give people the confidence to be assured that that quality standard that you're talking about can work. So again, it's about confidence and trust. And if you don't know what quality is, how could you expect others to define it for you or to know? So everything begins within the organization, I'm afraid. And that's my honest opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, can volunteers also be involved in QA, or is it only for core staff?
No, the volunteers are just as important. We have at the moment about 6 different types of volunteers. Some are paid. Well, not some of them paid. Most of them are paid because that is the standard we set. Again, quality standards. People must be paid even if they're volunteers. So volunteers should be important players in the quality control assurance game, so to speak. Um, their role is crucial because they are like the eyes and the ears. They are the ones between the trustees and the directors and the beneficiaries and members of the public. So, for example, we have volunteers who go to libraries, they go to gurdwaras, churches, synagogues, uh, temples, churches to deliver projects. And so we make sure that they understand, for example, monitoring and evaluation forms, the forms we use here, for example, on this platform, we teach them how to use the form, what it means. It's a very short but intensive program. We also teach them their role as volunteers. How would their role as volunteers impact on participants, beneficiaries? How it impacts on the monitoring process. Why is it they have to monitor people? Why they have to keep a log of attendances of people who come, the names of the people, or their postcodes or their zip codes, etc. So all of these things are very important. And of course, we ask them questions. Do you understand what monitoring is all about? Sometimes they don't know. They think it's just paperwork. And when they get involved in it and they begin to engage in the process, they then realize, hang on a minute, this is important to me as well. So volunteers, yes, because at some point, ladies and gentlemen, those volunteers can become part of your staff. And so it is essential that they be upskilled equally as your staff are being upskilled. So yes, I would say by all means, get them involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. Participants, due to time limitations, we cannot cover all the questions posted here. As now we have reached the end of the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for your active participation. Participants, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for today's session. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact us at support@fundsforngos.org. The feedback form will appear on your screen in a moment. Once again, thank you, Dr. Christopher.
Welcome.
And to all the participants, we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.
Thank you very much and have a good
Thank,
Christmas wherever you are.
same
Happy
to
New Year
you.
as well. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.